What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this video. Today we're going to talk about vulnerability management, and it is a subject that I selected as part of doing a TryHackMe video, and this is also part of the security engineer track. Alright, so vulnerability management as a definition. Okay, so the first thing is to know what is vulnerability management. So it's actually an ongoing, proactive What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this video. Today we're going to talk about vulnerability management, and this video is part of the security engineer track, and we'll use materials from the vulnerability management room, namely the attack machine lab. Alright, but before we do that, let's dive into the concepts. The first thing is the definition of vulnerability management. Before we talk about the definition of vulnerability management, let's see what we're gonna discover in this video. First, we're gonna talk about the vulnerability scanning and the difference between the vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management. The difference between them, and we're going to mention some open source products as well as commercial products for scanning vulnerabilities. Then we're going to talk about the classification of vulnerabilities, how they are managed publicly, and here we're going to talk about the frameworks that can aid in managing vulnerabilities, and lastly we're going to talk about the life cycle of managing vulnerabilities, namely the steps to take when we employ or when we start a vulnerability management program. Alright, so the first thing first, what is a vulnerability management? So the vulnerability management is a program you start as part of an ongoing information security program conducted by your department. So it is a procedure, okay, that you conduct as part of a program, security program, or maybe as part of a risk management plan. Remember, in risk management we talked about the risk assessment. In risk assessment, we try to discover threats, vulnerabilities, and we try to mitigate them as part of the risk mitigation. So vulnerability management could also be part of a risk, an overall risk management program. So it is the management and identification of vulnerabilities, more than only scanning vulnerabilities. So scanning vulnerabilities, here we use tools to discover vulnerabilities, but in vulnerability management, first we identify the assets and we scan for vulnerabilities, we prioritize vulnerabilities, and then we pick which one or which ones we're gonna remediate and which ones we're gonna just leave because they are low risk. So vulnerability management is much more than vulnerability scanning. It's a list of steps that includes the scanning of vulnerabilities. Now that's for vulnerability management. Now let's talk about vulnerability scanning. As the name suggests, guys, vulnerability scanning is the process of discovering vulnerabilities in computer systems. So to scan for vulnerabilities, we use either open source products or we use commercial products. Okay, so what are examples of open source products or commercial products? So as you can see in my notes here, I have these information. As you can see, for commercial scanners we have Nessus, we have Nexpose, and Acunetics. Throughout my videos we use Nessus more than one time to scan for vulnerabilities. If you can get back to them to see example. And for open source vulnerabilities there is OWASP-ZAP and there is OpenVas. Now I know, guys, you might be telling me that yeah, you can use Nmap scripting engine, and you can also use Nikto and much more than OWASP-ZAP and OpenVas as open source vulnerability scanners. That's true, but here we're talking about the very well known open source vulnerability scanners. In this video we're going to talk about OpenVas, and previously we used OpenVas to scan for vulnerabilities. I'm gonna put the links in the video description or in the playlist, so you can get back to them and watch how to use OpenVas as a vulnerability scanner. Alright, now, so this is for vulnerability scanning. So as you see, guys, scanning for vulnerabilities is part of an overall process, which is vulnerability management. Now let's talk about vulnerability classification. So yeah, so we scanned for vulnerabilities, we listed the assets, and we know the risk or the severity of every vulnerability. Now, the security community, they wanted a way to classify and manage the discovered vulnerabilities reported by security researchers. So they said, okay, we're going to come up with a classification for every vulnerability, and we're going to use something called the CVEs. So the CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. Common. The font is bad because I'm using my mouse to write. Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure. I'm writing the only shortcuts. So CVEs stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Disclosure. So that's the standard most communities use to classify and the vulnerabilities that people report. For example, if you go to this site, it's called CVE Details. So this is also a renowned website for searching CVEs and their impact. Okay, so CVEs, here we list the description of the vulnerability, the CVE number, the ID. Let's take an example. So say we talk about, let's search CVE 2021 23885. Now this is a Google search. Let's go back. Let's search by date, and let's go for the reported vulnerabilities the last 30 days. Alright, so as you can see, these are examples. So this is the CVE classification. As you can see, it consists of here we have the prefix, okay, and then we have the year where it was given here, 2023, and it is where when the vulnerability was discovered, and this is the sequence number. It is automatically generated, and here we can see the description of the vulnerability. Let's take a look. So this is a description for the vulnerability. In some websites, such as the National Vulnerability Database, we see more detailed information, such as the product affected. Here the product affected is, as you can see, it's the Linux kernel. That's the affected product. And we can see links to MITRE, NVD, and CVE. These are the MITRE and NVD CVE.org, the very most known sources for classifying and listing publicly reported vulnerabilities. If you go to NVD here, the link for this vulnerability in the NVD website, we can see the description, we can see the severity, 2 point. Okay, so we have two versions, 3 and 2, but information not provided to you here, maybe because the vulnerability was new and they didn't agree yet on the severity. And here we can see references. We're supposed to see more than this, so let's pick up some old one. So we go back and we select 2000 maybe 20 January, and take a look at this. Yeah, here we see more information. As you can see, we have the base score, the severity is medium, the CVSS vector. Here it is the scoring. Okay, it indicates how severe the vulnerability is. The scoring ranges from 0 to 10. So 0 for none, 10 for critical, and as you go up, as the severity goes higher. Here have the exploitability score, indicates how easy it is to exploit the vulnerability. The impact score, 2.9. As you can see, these numbers indicate the severity. As they go up, as the severity goes higher. And this is the source. If we go now to NVD, alright, so in NVD we see one score, it's the base score, indicates how severe the vulnerability is, 6.5 for medium. And this is a source for the exploit. Okay, that's proof of concept. Known affected software, the affected product, school management software, PHP and MySQL. Okay, so that is the classification I was talking about, and its description as well. So that's for vulnerability classification. Now, if we talk about vulnerability management frameworks, so vulnerability management frameworks, there is one that is very well known and widely used recently. It is the NIST Cyber Security Framework. Now, if you want a link for this framework, you can use this link. NIST Cyber Security Framework, and it contains a very in-depth guide to guide you guys how to manage a program, or to lead a program of managing vulnerabilities. And lastly, we're going to talk about the vulnerability management lifecycle. So these steps are directly taken from the NIST CSF. Okay, so because people might be asking, according to which source or which reference we are taking these steps to manage vulnerabilities, it is according to NIST CSF. Alright, so let's pick a new color, something different than blue. Okay, blue is good. No, blue is not good because, you know, so yellow. So the first step is, oh, look at this color, man, doesn't work. Dark green. Okay, so we have first the discover. So in the discover, what do we do here? As you can see, we compile a list of all the environments, resources, or assets. What are the computers, the servers, the maybe if we have other devices such as printers, IP phones, we list all the assets, okay, and we scan for vulnerabilities. So exactly this is the step we take here. In the discover, okay, we scan for vulnerabilities after we list the assets. Next, we prioritize. According to the severity of every vulnerability discovered, we prioritize the remediation and the patching. So in the prioritize, we're grouping and assigning a risk-based priority to the assets based on how crucial they are to the business. Okay, so we're going to take an example in a while. And then the third step is to assess. So after we list the vulnerabilities, okay, and we know how severe they are, we assess based on the risk and the impact of the vulnerability, and then we take the remediation step, including fixing the vulnerability. So we want to take an example, okay, of how we go through these steps. Okay, so discover, prioritize, assess, we report the vulnerabilities, and lastly we remediate. Of course, the remediation step heavily depends on the prioritize and the assess. Namely, we prioritize vulnerabilities with high severity score, meaning they have high impact on the asset connected to the vulnerability, such as a Linux system has a kernel vulnerability. This is a very high impact vulnerability with high severity. Alright, so there is an example in this room we can take. So if you open the browser, and so see here, if we go to the link, that link, this example includes using OpenVas to scan and report vulnerabilities. So we log in with admin, and the password is admin. Okay, don't save. Alright, so what is the first step? The first step is to discover. Okay, so what do? We go to assets and I click on hosts. And here, as you can see, we have 3 hosts. So if we click on this icon that includes a star, we can add new host to the list of hosts. Additionally, now if you want to add more assets to the list here in order to scan for the vulnerabilities, we're going to go to configuration and click on targets. Here we see a list of targets that have been added previously by other researchers. In this task, we're required to add a new target with the IP address here 198. So 198, oh, there it is. So, but how do we do that? We click on this button that includes an asterisk or a star, and we fill the information. Here we put a descriptive name of the asset. If it is a Windows machine, we can type Windows machine. Here you can select whether to type the IP address manually or to select from a file. So the file here will include a list of IP addresses separated by a new line. You can add it from here if you have a large network. Here you can exclude hosts that are not part of the scope of the vulnerability scanning, and here allow simultaneous scanning via multiple IPs. You can leave this as yes, and for other options you can leave them as yes and click on save. Once you do that, you will have added the targets here. That's the first step, adding the asset. Now these are individual IP addresses. In some cases you might add, as I said earlier, a whole network. So we do that by creating a file and separating the IP addresses per line, and then select this option, and here click from file and browse to the file. Okay. So once we added the asset here, we want to start the scanning. So what do? We go to scans and select tasks. So once we do that, we can click on a new task and say scanning, or say Windows machine scanning. Scan targets. Here we select the list of targets. This list will show all the targets that we have added from the configuration step here. So we're going to select Windows. If you want to run the scan later, you can select schedule, and for the other options you can leave them as is and click on save. This will start a new task, okay, and the OpenVas will start scanning the vulnerabilities on this machine, Windows machine scanning. And once it is done, you will see a highlight with done written on top of it. Alright, so once this is done, we need to take a look at the reports. So now we have what we did here. We are doing the discover step. We are still in the discovery step where we list the assets and their vulnerabilities. Let's go back. So let's take a look at something that has already been done. Linux app task. Click on that. We can see details of the task that has been created before. And we see that the scan has already been done. So we want to take a look at the reports. So we go to scans and then click on reports. So here we see the reports that have already been created before, and we see the task that is connected to every report, the date of the report and the task. To view the report, we can click on the date, and we see a dissect or a rundown of the report. So information such as the task name, okay, the scan time, the duration, the time it took to finish the scan, and the hosts that have been scanned. And we click on results, we can see the list of the vulnerabilities that have been discovered and their severity. So now we can start the process of prioritizing. So in the prioritize, we take a look at the severity of the vulnerability considering the nature of the asset. So as you can see, we have a high severity vulnerability, report outdated, end of life scan engine. Okay, this is not a vulnerability of the system, by the way. It is for the product itself. But anyway, you can see a list of the vulnerabilities and their severity. The other one is medium 4.8. It is clear text transmission of sensitive information. To take a look at more details on the vulnerabilities, you can click on the vulnerability and see more details, such as the summary, the detection results, detection methods, how the vulnerability scanner detected the vulnerability, the product affected, the impact an attacker could use this situation to compromise or eavesdrop on the communication between the client and server. What would happen if the attacker was successfully able to exploit this vulnerability, and what to do, the workaround. These information are very important when you want to go further in the life cycle. So right now, if you want to prioritize, we can go back here. Before we go into details, we want to prioritize. So basically, we see what are the vulnerabilities that are severe. So we're gonna pick this one in this case. So you're prioritizing this one. Okay. Now the next thing, we prioritize and assess the situation. Now we can report and remediate. So basically, we can have a look at the report. We can download the report in PDF if you want. Click on that and say you want to download the report in PDF. So click on OK, and now we'll start the process of reporting or giving the results in a PDF report. Now for the remediation, again, we can use the details tab. So this is the report. As you can see, it includes a dissection of every vulnerability discovered. High, according to the rating, high, medium. We'll have one high, one medium, and two lows. Scrolling down, one host has been scanned. And these are the breakdown of the vulnerabilities. One high, there's the summary. Scrolling down, this is the one that we're interested in, the medium one. So based on this host, we might be prioritizing the remediation of this vulnerability, the one with medium, because it's the only one, it's the highest severity one in the case of this host. We see description, summary, we see the impact, the solution, the affected software, detection method, and the references. Okay, so now this is a very brief breakdown on how to run the tool and demonstrate the lifecycle of managing vulnerabilities. Now let's go to the tasks here. I know, guys, there are some tasks we have to answer, so let's start answering the questions. The process encompassing vulnerability scanning and other factors such as risk acceptance is called the management. Is the overall objective of vulnerability management to increase an organization's risk exposure? No, we want to reduce the risk exposure. So classification. What is the CVSS? It is here the score. Okay, so we can take this vulnerability and take a look at the score. We can use CVE details to search for this vulnerability. We want to take a look at the CVSS score. This is the page score. Let's take this. Okay. So the base score is 4.6, and this indicates the CVSS score. What is the access complexity for this vulnerability? It is from here. As you can see, access complexity, namely AC, is low. So it is low. And with the fictional CVE, what would the CVE ID assign year be? To 2023. All right. So now with the tool, we have already scanned a Ubuntu machine. Okay. After scanning, what is the total number of medium level vulnerabilities? In the case of that host, it was only one. Let's use the breakdown here. So we have only one medium vulnerability, medium severity. What is the severity score for the vulnerability ICMP timestamp reply information disclosure? From the list here, this is the ICMP timestamp. It is low 2.1. What is the operating system and the version number of the target machine? And here we see in the host tab, we see information about the host. We click on the IP and we see here the host name, the IP address, the OS, along with the version. It is 20.04, as you can see. All right, next. Download the Linux app task report in PDF format. What is the severity rating of the vulnerability? We already answered this, it's medium. What is the solution type for TCP timestamps vulnerability? So the solution type includes either patching or mitigation. Patching is updating the system. Mitigation is taking measures to prevent the exploitation of the vulnerability. So if you go to the report and we take a look at TCP timestamps. This is TCP timestamps. Low, not this one. Yeah. The solution type is, as you can see, mitigation. While on the other hand, yeah, ICMP is mitigation as well. But for the medium one, it is a workaround. So here we have mitigation. What is the CVE for ICMP timestamp reply information disclosure? We can extract this from the report. So this is the ICMP timestamp reply information disclosure, and the CVE is found in the references. This is the CVE. Next, remediation. As a security engineer, the priority of a remediation ticket for a critical vulnerability must be high, of course. Here we assess, and here after the prioritization of the vulnerabilities based on the severity and the assessment, we choose what kind of criticality the remediation ticket will be. Here we send the ticket to the team to remediate the vulnerability. This could be mitigation, workaround, or patching. So for the vulnerability that is high in severity, we choose a high rating for the ticket. And that's all there is for this room. That was it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm gonna see you later.